The other was taken with a custom equatorial rig I've spent years building and tuning. The same target was the Owl Nebula, that's M97, one of the most demanding planetary nebulae in the northern sky. At first I thought it was a simple target, but now I'm really not so sure. It's got a faint shell, it's got subtle detail, it's got two dark patches that give it its name. They look like eyes. Not easy at all. And here's where it gets interesting. These two images represent 403 minutes and 444 minutes of integration time, approximately the same. 41 minutes separate these two 7-hour imaging sessions. For all practical purposes, it's a dead heat on total exposure time. Whatever wins here wins on optical quality alone. Let me show you exactly what we're working with here, because the hardware difference matters. The Seestar S50 50mm aperture, a fully automated smart scope. It aligns itself, stacks in device. However, I did stack the frames myself using Cyril, and exactly the same steps and method that I used to stack the rig images, so that we make a completely fair comparison. The Seestar then delivers finished images to your phone. I've been using it alongside my custom rig for a little while now, and the results have genuinely surprised me. The custom rig, significantly more aperture, a proper equatorial mount, 4-minute sub-exposures. This is a setup most serious astrophotographers would recognize. Heavier, more complex, more control over every variable. I would like a bigger telescope, but that's quite another thing. Now, why M97? Because planetary nebulae are something that I haven't really imaged very much, and I know that they are genuinely hard. A galaxy like Andromeda is enormous in the sky. M97 is just 3.4 minutes across. It's compact, it's faint, and it has real structural detail that separates a good image from a great one. If you want to stress test both setups honestly, you aim at something that punishes mediocrity. I've already tested galaxies, and the Seestar did come out very, very well there. I'll put the link to that video down in the description, so do check that one out. So here's the thing, I didn't plan for a perfectly equal integration time. It just worked out that way, and that turned a good comparison into a really clean one. Let me walk you through the actual numbers, because this is where the comparison gets its credibility. And before I do go through those, I'd just like to ask you, please like this video. It doesn't take a second to do that, and it really helps me out. And subscribe to the channel for more videos if you found this at all useful. And do make a comment. I love to read comments. They really help me to improve my videos, to answer any questions that you might have. What do my viewers want to hear from me next? So if you tell me in the comments, that'd be great. Okay, let's move on. The rig. I did image over 2 nights, and I took 4-minute sub-exposures throughout that time with my rig. The total frames captured across both nights by my rig was 169, and after filtering by FWHM, in other words rejecting frames where atmospheric seeing degraded the stars beyond acceptable sharpness, I was left with 111 frames, which I then stacked. That's a 65.7% pass rate. That gives you 444 minutes of clean integration time. The Seestar, I only used it on night 2. I didn't use it on night 1. And when I did use it, I took 30-second sub-exposures because I was using it in EQ mode. And I completed 869 frames on the night. That's how many I captured. In Cyril, I set the FWHM threshold to 5.2. And if you don't know what FWHM means, and if you don't know how to use this in Cyril to filter out and reduce the number of frames in your stack to the best ones, then I suggest that you watch the video that I linked to down below in the description as well. Okay, I was left with 806 frames to stack from the Seestar, an 86% pass rate. That's 403 minutes. So I hope you understand what this means. The Seestar's 30-second subs had a higher pass rate than the rig's 4-minute subs. That's not a flaw, that's merely physics. Shorter exposures are much less vulnerable to individual moments of bad seeing. You lose a 30-second frame, you lose 30 seconds. You lose a 4-minute frame and you lose 4 minutes. The Seestar's approach has a real statistical advantage in variable conditions like those I was confronted with the other few nights. So 444 minutes versus 403, both filtered in approximately the same way, both stacked with the same software, and the only real variable left is the optics. So I think we can make a fair comparison here. Before I get into the verdict, a quick word. There's no sponsorship on this video, no brand deal, just me, 2 setups and a clear sky. If this kind of content is useful to you and you want to help me keep it going, there are 2 ways for you to do that. You can buy me a coffee, links in the description, and honestly, every one of those lands, and I'm really thankful if you decide to do this. Or you can check out the Astro Imagery shop, where I sell phone cases with my own deep sky images on them, including some of the nebulae we've been shooting together. The link's there too. Either way, no pressure. Just know it genuinely helps. Now, back to the owl. So here is what I've ended up with, and I want you to really look at this before I tell you what I see, because your eyes should be the first judge. What I see is that the rig is better. I'll say that very clearly. Look at the central star. The rig resolves it more cleanly. Look at the minor detail and the contrast. I think it's a little bit better. The rig's edge is tighter, slightly more defined. You can see a little bit more color in the rig's image than you can in the Seestar's image. And there's certainly a little bit more definition and resolution. And these 2 dark regions here, the owl's eyes, that's the name of this nebula. The rig separates them with a little more confidence. I think they're slightly deeper set. If you're pixel peeping, the rig wins, full stop. And I'd really, really like to have your comments on this. How do you see this comparison? I can't say that I'm totally blown away with my results, but it is the first time I've ever imaged this particular target, and I do believe it's fairly difficult. I think I need to spend a lot more time on this to get further details out of it. But let's take a look quickly now at the noise. And when we look at the same scale, I think you can see that there's much more noise in the Seestar image. And look at how much of the outer halo that each setup captures. Look at the overall smoothness of the background sky, and look at the Seestar's core structure. It's all there, not as sharp, not as clean, but genuinely there. The Seestar lost this comparison, but it lost it narrowly, and it did fairly well, better than I expected. Against a setup with larger aperture, much longer sub-exposures, and 41 extra minutes of total integration time. That's the context you need to understand. Now here's my practical advice, and this is the question I know you're going to ask next. Would a bigger telescope fix this? More aperture, longer focal length, better results? Let's start with the physics. Aperture is the most honest number in astrophotography. Signal scales up with the square of your aperture diameter. Double the aperture, 4 times the photons per unit time. The Seestar's 50mm ceiling is real. A 100mm aperture refractor doesn't just perform twice as well, it collects 4 times the light. That's the whole game at the most fundamental level. But what about focal length? This one's more nuanced. For extended objects like M97, what actually controls your signal per pixel is your F ratio, your aperture divided by your focal length. More focal length spreads the nebula across more pixels, but also spreads the sky background across more pixels. The signal to noise ratio per pixel stays roughly the same. What longer focal length gives you is angular resolution, finer detail in the shell structure, better separation of small features. For a 3.4 arc minute target like M97, that really makes a difference. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is the part that most people don't want to hear. There's a ceiling on all of this, and it's not your telescope, it's the atmosphere. We call it seeing. Every night, the atmosphere blurs your image by somewhere between 1 and 4 arc seconds, and no amount of aperture, focal length, or integration time can fix that. A bigger telescope doesn't beat seeing. It actually reveals it more. The Seestar's coarse plate scale actually hides poor seeing. The atmospheric blur is smaller than a single pixel. A long focal length scope makes every moment of turbulence visible. So on a perfect night, stable air, sub-arc second seeing, a 100mm scope at 600mm focal length would make both of these images look like starting points. But on a mediocre night, the gap closes, and that's exactly what you're seeing here. The rig won, but the margin is honest. It's telling you something true about the sky that night, not about the limitations of the Seestar. So here's the final verdict. If you're an astrophotographer asking whether the Seestar S50 holds up on planetary nebulae, the answer is yes, but with real caveats. Planetary nebulae are some of the most demanding targets in visual astrophotography. The Seestar is working with a 50mm aperture and 30-second subexposures against physics that genuinely favour larger glass and longer subs. And yet the margin here is narrow. 444 minutes of rig data against 403 minutes of Seestar data, and you have to look carefully to find where one beats the other. Now let's bust the biggest myth in this whole conversation. The myth is that smart scopes are toys, that they're for beginners who don't know any better. That sounds a bit weird coming from someone who also runs an EQ custom rig, but I think the data is telling a more nuanced story. The Seestar is not the right tool for every target or every ambition, but it is a legitimate imaging instrument. And if it's what you have, don't worry. I think most of us underestimate it. Point it at the sky and start collecting photons. The results are going to surprise you. I'll put everything, the stacking settings, the filtering thresholds, and the equipment I use on the rig, linked in the description below. If you've done your own smart scope versus custom rig comparison, please drop the results in the comments below and tell me your experience. I read every single one of these comments, and I'd love to get a discussion going. Please hit the like button if this is clicking for you, and subscribe if you haven't already. There's more of this coming, and I'll see you in the next one.